anyway, I've been recording my videos for a couple of years using Screencast-O-Matic, and I like that a lot better than the system they're trying to impose on us. The other problem is there's so many professors trying to upload into this new system, into the My Media system that they created, that I haven't been able to upload my Tuesday lecture yet. And I've been trying since Tuesday night. So anyway, I'm going to try again today. I broke it into 5 or 6 pieces, so there'd be smaller file sizes. But I didn't get a cable until today. They're saying that it makes a big difference to cable it in rather than using the Wi-Fi. So we'll see how that works today. But if I don't get it fixed today, we'll postpone assignments and stuff. But we'll talk about assignments in just a second. We'll revisit that. If I don't get the lecture up today, I can easily get it up today if I put it on YouTube and embed it back into Moodle. That I've been doing for a couple of years. There's never any problem with that. Our problem is that the system they've set up is uploading into that cloud system, and that's breaking down. And we're having to do that because the Chinese students don't access YouTube, as I understand it. So that's what's fouling a lot of professors up, is a system that does not seem capable of handling our 200 or so professors all trying to do this at one time. So it's rather frustrating because, like I said, the technology is not hard, it's just not working. And that's a whole other problem. So I'm going to try to turn off one light at least so you can see the slides a little bit better. Okay, well, got a little bit of light up there. I guess you guys can see the slides okay. Anyway, so we've got to fix that system, or this whole idea of doing making the courses available to the students in China is not going to work. So I will, for those of you here, I will guarantee the video will be up by tomorrow, or the both lectures will be up tomorrow, because I will put them on YouTube and embed them back if I have to. So that part's easy to do. It takes a little while to process the video, then upload to YouTube, then embed it back into Moodle. It takes a little while, but it's not hard, and it always works. I can't guarantee the same thing for the students who are watching this in China. I will be trying to process the video through the systems they've set up for us as fast as I can. So we may have to adjust some of the assignments, deadlines and so forth as we figure out this system, but I hope it will work okay today. So this is class 2, or lesson 2. I wanted to go through the syllabus and so forth today. I put my information up here. So I think everything here is okay that I had on before, except like today, I couldn't very well be having office hours today since I'm in here instead. But I am typically in by 10 in the morning, and I am always here in the evening, almost always. So I did have somebody come visit me last night at 7 o'clock, and that's fine. I was here actually till after 11 o'clock. So if you want to know you can get a hold of me, it's usually at night, but it's usually best to, since it's so far away from your dorms and so forth, email me and confirm that I'm there, and I can, in the evening, I can easily meet with you if you need some help with something. So let's go. We'll go on Moodle. I've uploaded the syllabus, and they've created a whole bunch of documents now. It used to be everything was on the syllabus. So now we have three different documents that would normally be in the syllabus, and they're overlapping. Let's go through those documents. I'll bring those up, and want to make sure you know what we're doing. I'm actually not going to spend much time on the syllabus. So the most important one is the course, SS coursework. That's the one you most need to be familiar with, but I'll run through this real quickly. You probably have already seen it, so I probably don't need to go through it a lot. This is kind of a lot of gobbledygook anyway, doesn't mean a whole lot to you. I'll pause here a second. It's actually, I think, in all three documents is this part of what the course is made up of. Basically coursework and the final journal, which really means there's really two types. This semester, as I mentioned in the last class, I usually have students do presentations because it's impossible, or it's essentially impossible, at least this semester, while we're getting the technology set up and everything, to have the Chinese students do presentations, at least as a team particularly. It'd be very difficult for them. They'd have to, but maybe possible in the future. So instead of having team presentations, I've had to enlarge the scores for these, for the other assignments. And so I guess my expectations might go up a little bit since you're not having to do presentations. As I mentioned, and I'll go back to this under coursework, we will have, I think, 12 quizzes during these. I'm skipping down to quizzes here because that is worth 40%, and the other two kind of mesh together. So the quizzes are going to be worth 4 points each, so they're worth a little bit more than they were before, and I don't think I really have to make them harder, but you know, a lot of students struggle with the quizzes because they aren't doing what I tell them to do. What I tell you to do is take notes for both of your assignments, take notes in class, and take notes as you watch the videos. If you come to class and you watch the videos and you take notes, then that should facilitate both your quizzes and your journal entries, because you already have some ideas written on a piece of paper. And so I strongly encourage you to take notes as you do these two activities, come to class and watch the videos. And then the assignments will be easy after that. So with the quizzes, if nothing else, by the way, just writing that activity, there is what's called kinesthetic learning. As you write down notes, it embeds itself more in your memory. And so it's another reason to write notes. I mentioned that I'm really good at getting good grades when it comes to cramming into my brain, even though I think it's worthless, because I know I will forget very quickly what I cram in there for a test. But that's one of the main things I did was in order to get top grades, it was kinesthetic learning. I mean, it's not just kinesthetic because you're also looking at it. I mean, it's multiple sensory. If you're taking notes, you are looking at your notes as you do it. It's kinesthetic, you're moving your body, and that enhances the learning. And so what I would do in order to ace, I mentioned in the hardest class of my master's program, the number possible was 181. I got 179, and the next highest was 126. So I got basically 50% higher grade than the second person in that class. And what I did, which is what I do with any class that I really care about, is I took all my notes, and I also looked at the textbook, and I wrote down anything I thought he might ask on cards, what we call 3x5 cards or 4x6 cards if you're measuring in inches. And I wrote down everything I thought that he would, the answers to any question I thought he would ask. And so it took quite a while, took several hours to write all those cards, but I was learning kinesthetically and visually at the same time. And then I stayed up all night and looked at those cards and memorized those cards. And the professor said he didn't think he could have done as well in his own test as I did. So when I really care about something, that's what I do. So I encourage note-taking as a way of learning. And then I encourage, if your notes, especially the ones you take in class, may not be real clear, so it would be good to go rewrite them. 3x5 cards would be good. It's a way of like flashcards. Rewrite them while it's fresh in your mind, so you can include anything that you couldn't write down at the time. So your notes are not going to be perfect, but if you go and rewrite them soon after the class, you'll remember things that you didn't get in your notes. And then your notes will be more complete, and you'll have, if you put it on 3x5 cards, they become flashcards that you can go back and look at. Anyway, if you do that sort of thing, then the quizzes are going to be pretty easy. The quizzes will be you'll have about 2 minutes per question. And these are, true and false, multiple choice, or matching questions. You don't have time to go look up everything if you haven't watched the video and you haven't taken notes and you didn't come to class. 2 minutes is not enough to look up answers. But 2 minutes is enough if you already have a pretty good idea what you watched and you had some notes and so forth. Then 2 minutes per question is enough for you to get a really good grade if you've actually done the work. If you haven't done the work, then sorry, that's up to you then. If you don't do the work, you don't get the grade. It's pretty easy. And so being worth 4% each, 4 percentage points each, is still not very much per quiz. So you can blow a quiz and it's not going to hurt you too badly. But in fact, if you never read anything, you could probably get almost half of it correct. Just in the nature of quizzes, you can guess quizzes sometimes. So you're going to get some points if you didn't do anything. And so there's almost no way you're going to lose 4 points except not take the quiz. And even at that, by the way, there's going to be 12 quizzes, and I'm only going to count your best 10. And so if you are too sick to take the quiz is not going to be in class like it was last semester. It's going to be at home, wherever you're at, wherever you have access to the internet, so you can get onto Moodle, you can take the quiz. And I will give, I haven't set the exact times yet, but I will probably put it into like a 6-hour window, so that sometime in those 6 hours, I would expect you to find, it will be limited to a certain number of minutes. So even though you go in whether you go in at 6 in the evening or 12 midnight, you're still only going to have 2 minutes per question. So once you run out of time, it closes itself. So, anyway, the quiz should not be hard if you guys do the work. And meanwhile, doing the quiz will help you kind of recall some of the stuff and maybe make note of some of the things I think are important to help you with writing your journal entry. The journal entry, as I said, the minimum is basically 200 words per class, so you see above that in the journal entry, those are only, as a weekly assignment, they're worth 2 points. I won't grade every one of them myself. I may have my assistant give you some feedback sometimes. I'll give you some feedback sometimes. And until class 10, you can't change your grade in the 2 point, the weekly assessment, but you can change what you uploaded for the final journal. And so if we give you some feedback, or over the period of those first 10 classes, those first 4 weeks basically, if you gain insights as to how you could do your journal better, you can rewrite. And so that will change, you won't get exactly the same grade when I come to grading your final journal. After week 10, however, because we have a lot of students, after week 10, I'm going to start grading the first 10 entries, or the first however many entries, up to that point, for the final journal. So after week 10, what you upload is what you get. You can't redo it. So in the last 5 classes, you upload your journal and you can't change it once you've uploaded it. Okay, so the first 10 classes, and you don't actually have to, well, the first entry is for classes 1, 2, and 3. In other words, all this week. And you'll have about a week to make that journal entry before I would look at it. So that's why it's not really, you actually have 12 entries, not 15, is because the first 3 are all in one, and I'm not, you can do something for week 15 or not, or class 15 or not, that's up to you. But if you want to finish it and not include class 15, I won't penalize you for that, as long as everything else is in good shape. So there will be 12 entries altogether. Only your best 10 again will count for that 2-point weekly score or class score. Again, if you have written down notes in class and you've written down notes and you've done the videos, then you should have some idea of what to write in your journal. This is not an English class, and so the amount of score based on spelling and grammar is minimal. We'll go through that in a second. It's basically 10%, as long as I can understand what you're writing. So there is if I can't understand what you're writing, your grammar and spelling is so bad that I can't understand it, well, then it's going to affect all the rest of the grading. I can't do anything about that. If I don't understand what you're saying, that's going to hurt your grade in all categories. But the only specific score on spelling and grammar is actually going to be done by Turnitin, Turnitin.com. It will analyze your spelling and grammar, and for those first 10 weeks, you can redo in fact, you can redo it more than once. You can upload your journal entry and then see the mistakes and immediately change it before I grade it. So you can change it once before the deadline and before I start grading, and so then you have done better because you've learned what Turnitin says you did wrong with your grammar and spelling. And also it tells you whether or not you have excessive similarity to other people's entries. Excessive to me would be, it's not an exact number, because if I sense that somebody is copying somebody else, like when for example, let's say it's 20% similarity. Normally 20% similarity probably be fairly safe. You might not get any deduction with 20%. Except if I see that it's 15% the same as another student at this university. Well, then that means you basically have been copying somebody else for 15% of your paper. Well, then 15% can be too much. Not to get a 0, but to get deductions. On the other hand, 15%, if it's similar to 15 different papers from students all around the world, well, then that won't be a deduction, because I'm going to presume that you didn't go read 15 papers from students all the way around the world to come up with your writing. So it's not just the percentage of similarity, it's where did that similarity come from. And so before I make any deductions, I look at those connections. It's similar, okay, 20%, I'm starting to get a little concerned here. Then I look at where that 20% came from. If it's it's primarily from one other source, then yeah, it could lead to deductions. Obviously, if it's more than 20%, get to 30 to 50 or whatever, then that's a bigger problem. So anyway, so the point is that if you upload it soon enough, you can correct that even with each weekly submission. You can upload once, check its spelling and grammar, report, check its similarity report, see what it says, and try to make some changes to avoid any penalty in those areas. But even if you don't make any changes, as I said, the most that you'll be penalized on spelling and grammar in and of itself is only 10%. So it's not, I'm not trying to make this into an English class or a English composition class, but I do need clarity in your writing. I need to understand what you're trying to say, and so that's the biggest part. Is the summary of the content is worth 40% of the grade, whether it's on the weekly basis or in the final paper, the final journal. That's about 40% of the grade. I want you to be explaining what it is that you learned in class, and then 30% is how it impacts you. That's the self-reflection portion. Is 30%. How could you have applied it in the past, or how could you apply it now, or how will you apply it in the future? Those sorts of questions. How you felt about it. Self-reflection. So that's still a pretty broad area when I talk about self-reflection. But those are things to think about. How I could have used these ideas, how I can use them now, how I can use them in the future, and reflect on that, and how maybe change your thinking and change your paradigm, whatever, however you want to express that. So most of the grade is that 70%, 40% on what you summarize out of the class and the assignments, and what and then how it impacts you personally. I guess the one I skipped over is 20% is just have you written more or less the minimum number. If you wrote a little bit more, you get a little bit more credit for writing more than the 200 to 300 words. Then you get a little bit extra boost if you've written more than that. And I'll go through that. I do have that in a criteria sheet that it will go through in a second. So. Obviously, the final journal is the final journal. In that case, I look at everything. But again, after week 10, I'm going to start grading your final journal in essence. I'm going to start grading your first 10 entries as of class 10. Otherwise, I can't do it justice. I can't grade as well. I end up having to kind of skip through your journals if I have to read a lot of them in the last, like in 3 days or something in preparing your final grade. That's hard to do. It may not be as hard. They were projecting we might have up to 90 students altogether in the class. It doesn't look like we'll have that many, so it'll be a little easier than I was told to anticipate. So anyway, I'll be able to read them all more closely and grade them more fairly than you might say kind of a random selection of pieces of your journal, which I've had to do in the past because I have had 90 students in a class before. And that becomes very difficult to grade at 90 journals that average, like I said, the minimum would be about 3,000 words at the end of the semester, but the average is typically about 4,500 words is typically the average. So if I had 90 students times 4,500 words, that's a lot of words to grade, and that makes it difficult. So I'm going to give myself a little extra time. So up until class 10, you can you can make change. You can upload it to turnitin.com even more than once before I even check that version, the first version. And then after that, you can still change it for the final version. And so you can improve it as you go along. Any questions on that? Actually, I'll come back to the criteria in just a second. The list of videos that I have on the syllabus, some of them, most of them are accurate, but in some cases I've eliminated some in order to shorten the amount of homework. But you'll see there's links to most of the videos that we will be talking about. I'll go out of the syllabus and oops. Guess I went out of Google. The teaching plan is essentially the same, so I'm just going to skip down to the coursework, because actually teaching plan is really where all those videos should have been listed. But when I first created the course, they had us put everything in the syllabus. So the syllabus and the teaching plan are essentially the same. The coursework, though, is where we get into more detail, and that's where you should probably read this on your own just to make sure. I've tried to explain it already, but same as with the journal entries, we'll have a quiz after class 3. So I haven't exactly scheduled it yet. I'll announce the schedule tomorrow, but sometime early next week, we'll have your first quiz based on this week's classes. I'll probably do that on Monday, so that because then after that, I'm supposed to do a quiz for every class. So I should clean it off the deck, so to speak, and have the first quiz. But if I have trouble uploading for the students in China, I may just have to change the quiz a little bit. I don't know, that's another problem. I have to try to solve that today. I guess just to again explain, there will be 12 weekly quizzes. So even though I call them weekly class related quizzes. I kept trying to remove weekly out of there, but I see I still left some in. 12 quizzes related to the classwork, of which only the 10 best will count. So again, as I explained the other day, I'm presuming that most of you will get a cold someday and not come to class or whatever. So that's really, unless you have an excuse, a health excuse or some other excuse that covers more than 2 classes, you can't take the quiz late. I'm allowing you to drop your 2 worst scores, and that is because as I explained in the last class, if I reopen the quiz, I have to reopen it to everybody, and it's a lot of hassle and time. If one person says, "Oh, I need to retake that test because I was sick," and somebody else said, "I need to retake," and then 2 days later somebody else says, "I need to retake the test," then I find myself spending a lot of time opening it, closing it, opening it and closing it, talking to people. Well, do you really have a good excuse? So the idea of dropping 2 is not just so you can be lazy. A couple of classes. It is so that will cover when for some reason you missed a class, technology went bad, you were sick, whatever it is. But the quizzes will be, you'll have a period of time of at least 6 hours in which to take the quiz. And so, and it will be a few days, maybe it won't be. Yeah. It'll be at least 2 days after the class. So in some cases, the quiz for the Tuesday class might come after the Thursday class. Okay, because I want to make sure you have time to do the homework. So it will be at least a couple of days afterwards, even if we've had another class in between. it will be at least 2 days after in order to give you some time to do the homework. Might even be 3 days. So hopefully that won't be too confusing, but I want to make sure, if anything, your additional classes will help reinforce some of the ideas probably anyway. So it may be a little bit confusing, but I still want to err on the side of giving you enough time to do the homework. So I think I'll plan to do it on the 3rd day after a class. So in most cases, it will be after you had a different class. So you have to just kind of sort that on your mind. But you'll have like a 6-hour window in which to take the quiz. So even if you're sick, there's not a lot of excuse. You pretty much have to be in your deathbed not to be able to do the quiz, because you still have 3 days to catch up, to watch. I will upload, especially for you guys here in the classroom, physical classroom. If I have any trouble uploading the video through the new system, through what they call My Media, I will upload it to YouTube and embed it back. And in fact, there are already videos on there that from last semester that cover basically the same material. So at the very least, I will not take down the video I did last semester until I have replaced it somehow. Let me put it that way. So you can expect a new video to go up, but last semester's video will be there until it goes up. I'm saying that, but I may have already deleted this week's, but I will get it up quickly. So within 1 day, you'll have a video. And if I upload last semester's video, somehow you'll get a video. So you can prepare for your, even if you missed the class, like I said, you can watch the video version of it. And you'll have time to watch the other videos. For you guys, it's not a problem. I'm still struggling with uploading all the videos, because it means also uploading all the YouTube videos that I have the class normally watch. And that may even be part of the problem, is that trying to upload somebody else's videos, embedding it into Moodle from YouTube to Moodle is totally permissible. Making a copy of it and uploading it may be part of the problem I'm having, is they may be saying, well, you can't upload somebody else's video. Well, this whole class was based on videos. So I'm not exactly sure what else is going on that's roadblocking me right now. I may, if that becomes apparent that they're blocking me because I'm trying to upload somebody else's video, then I'll have to do a summary. I'll have to do an extra lecture just summarizing what people are supposed to learn from those videos, I guess. I don't know. We'll work those out. I think this part, it does explain how to get into Turnitin. As I understand it, basically all of your ID numbers and stuff, your names and IDs have been uploaded already and are cleared for Turnitin. So you're already, when you go in, you don't have to pay anything, for example. They should recognize your name and ID when you sign in. You may have to still go through creating an account, but it should allow you to make that account without paying anything. Probably you should use your Xiamen email, because it may be tying into that. If you try to use a private email, then it may not recognize you as being a Xiamen student. So I would use when you give it your email address, use your Xiamen email. So it should allow you to do that. The course you're uploading into, or that you're enrolling into, is it's on here, but you may have a hard time seeing it. I have it on another slide in just a second. But it's Success Strategies 2020, and the course number that's written up here is 239 39 820, and that'll be in bigger type in another slide in a second. And the password is just like our password for the Moodle is Success 2020. Same password. Okay, so I'm just going to go down. I want to talk about the grading system at Xiamen kind of in general, to explain if you don't understand, you need to understand. The university has two theories which are incompatible. And one is they're trying to go to objective-based learning, which if they truly went to an objective-based learning, then all of you should be able to get an A. But at the same time, they told us that you can't all get an A. That only if I have more than 25% of you get an A or A minus, I'm in trouble. Okay, so the idea is incompatible. It is not, I guess I don't have a thing here. The idea is, the two ideas are incompatible, to have a curve, what we call a bell curve, and objective-based learning. They don't fit together. But we actually, at the end of the semester, have to sit through a meeting where we have to defend how many A's we gave. Is one of the things they look at, and how many flunks we gave. You know, why do we have so many A's? Why do we have so many flunks? They let some classes sneak by with more A's but we can't all do it, for sure. I might try pushing ours up to about 30% and think I can get away with it because this is a success class and I think everybody should be successful in the class. The other rule on the bell curve is that we're supposed to average a B minus. And so again, I can push that up a little bit maybe into a B range, up into a B, a regular B instead of a B minus. But I'm somewhat limited as to how good a grade I can give. So you have to be aware that in most of your classes, it's on a competitive basis. When I go through these, I can't really do much with the quizzes. You get what you get with a quiz. But with the journal, I do have to distinguish one from another. So if you all do great work, I can't give you despite you achieving the objective, I can't give you all an A by university policy. So I have to discriminate the variations and the range of quality. So I don't know what else to say about that. I don't like that. I like being able to give lots of A's, and as I mentioned in the last class, GPA has no correlation with success in life. So if GPA has no correlation with success in life, what do grades mean in a university? Almost nothing. They're worth nothing. Especially if they're memory-based anyway, then that's definitely nothing. Because memory is, as I mentioned the other day, you remember what's important, and you look up something you forget. You know where to find it if you're in the real world doing a job. Nobody, at least very few people, and only in very rare occasions, does anybody in the real world have to cram a bunch of information into their head. Maybe there are some professional exams and stuff where you might have to do that. But most of your professional career, you will not be cramming for your next day's work. It's not done in the real world. And so the idea of having a great memory, a great short-term memory that we foster, that I just was talking about a few minutes ago, in order to be successful, is irrelevant in the real world. So that's why it also relates into the idea I mentioned in the last class of multiple intelligences. Again, my brother was a very average student, but he's a very successful business person, and he's worth more than 10 times what I'm worth. Probably 20, 30 times more than what I'm worth. I've got the PhD, he's got the money, okay? So he has social intelligence, and he's applied it in the real world in such a way that he's become very wealthy. And a lot of people do that. As I mentioned, again, the average millionaire had a 2.9 GPA. So they were not at the top of their classes. So there's no correlation between success and in fact, there's a higher correlation, ironically, there's a higher correlation with success in life between a positive outlook than with your GPA. So if you're by nature a very positive person, you're much more likely to be successful in life than if you have a high GPA and you're a negative person. Much more likely, because positive attitude has a higher correlation with success. So again, that's kind of describes my brother. Okay, so yeah, like I said, if I try to, when I'm free to do it at other universities, I use grades as a way to motivate people, but I don't use them to punish people. So I give lots of A's. Usually in my grading at previous university, I might have had a fairly big, like a lot of A's and a lot of C's and D's of people who didn't bother to do the work, and almost no B's. Everything was one end or the other. Those that did the work, those who didn't do the work, pretty much. So that's how I like to use grades, but I'm not permitted to do that here. So getting down to the real, you know how a quiz is done. That's done by the machine, so I don't even have to think about it. So let's look at the criteria for your weekly assignments. It's essentially the same as with your final journal, except the numbers are slightly different. So can you guys see that okay? Do I need to turn off some more lights? You see it okay? It's kind of small type. Do I need to turn off some lights? I'll turn off the lights. I'll try that. Okay, and this is important. You need to understand. And so basically the spelling and grammar, again, I'll base that on Turnitin.com's analysis, mostly. Actually, as I go through the papers, I've noticed that Turnitin doesn't always catch all the errors. It's not a perfect spelling and grammar checker. So there are times when as I'm reading, I actually have some trouble reading because people are making mistakes that Turnitin didn't catch. They're not spelling mistakes, they're grammar mistakes that Turnitin isn't catching. And so it's not exactly what, based on Turnitin's score, but it's pretty close. So on a weekly basis, you get the full 10% of the grade if you have like 4 mistakes in it, according to Turnitin. And you get no points if you have 14 or more mistakes. So again, if you get it in early before the deadline, then you have time to actually redo it. Let's see what Turnitin says and redo it and get a better grade on that by the time before I actually go and grade it. So you can even improve your score. You can upload as many times as you want to, basically. But at a certain point, I'm going to be grading it. So once I start grading, it's too late. But you can continue to improve it if you want to all the way until the final journal is graded at the end of the semester. So you can keep uploading and uploading. I've taken off all limitations. However, when it comes time, if you're more than, I think I said it earlier up, I maybe go back and look in the writing. I will probably start about a week after your due date, or at least a few days after your due date. Actually, as of your due date, whatever date I tell you is due, is when I will begin. I can begin grading. I may not immediately. I may wait a couple of days, and I won't know if you changed it after the due date. But as soon as I start, I'm not going to start grading until the due date's passed, let me put it that way. And at that point, I'm grading whatever's there. And then when we get to week 10, then I may, at that point, at this moment I haven't, but we're not there yet, then at that point I may say you can only upload once. Because as I said, as of week 10, I'm going to start grading as if it's for the final journal. So I can keep up with it and make sure I give plenty of time to reading everybody's. So obviously at week 10, I can't grade the assignments, or class 10. I can't be grade at that point, grade the assignments for 11, 12, 13, 14, or if you do 15, 15. But I can go back at that point as of week 10, go back to and regrade weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I can grade those, give those a final grade, and start doing that as of week 10. So at that point, things will be kind of frozen. You get to upload one time. Then under completeness is worth 20% of the grade. And I've basically arranged this so that if you do the minimum, you still get an A minus. So if you only do 200 words, which is the minimum, you still get 16 out of 20. That's 80%, that's an A minus. If you do more than that, then you can get up to 20 points if you do 400 words. So there's some reward for doing more. And that's kind of proportional to what it'll be in the final also. If you do the minimum, if you do 3,000 words, you can get an A minus in that area. The only other thing I would only other place I would deduct points on, other than just the number of words, is if you plagiarize, in which case it's not, those aren't your words. And so that's one place where I would deduct a bunch of points if I catch too much similarity, too much plagiarism. Then the most important part down at the bottom, the content review. It says to get all the points, it should be accurate. I have to confess, I don't go exactly by this, but this is a rule of thumb. I read it and I get a sense of how thoroughly you've kind of summarized. I don't necessarily always count exactly how many sources you did. If you do a really good review of some and maybe just kind of skim over some others, but you have 400 words a week, well then I kind of don't count how many sources you have exactly. So this is kind of a rule of thumb, not precise, but a rule of thumb. But the rule of thumb is if in your reflection you summarize to some degree what we talked about in class and 4 other assigned videos, then and you've done a reasonably good job of summarizing those. Again, I'm not expecting 1,000 words a week to do this, and so you can't give a complete summary of class and 4 videos. It can't really be complete, but it can be a partial, maybe one sentence for each of those 4 videos, what the essence of it was, something like that. So I'm not expecting a full paragraph on each source because that would be pushing you up over 400 words even. Although it wouldn't be that hard, frankly. If you watch the videos, you've taken notes, it wouldn't be that hard to write 2 sentences on a video. Certainly one sentence you should be able to get out of a video. So it's not really going to be that hard to do this. So you need to understand what I'm looking for. Are you summarizing what happened during that period of time? You understand that? So again, I don't always go exactly count. I don't exactly count all the sources. If you're doing a good job of summarizing the things that are important to you, then I may ignore the fact that you only had the class and 2 sources, but you did a good job of summarizing those. Then I may not penalize you for not having 4 videos. But if you have this criteria in mind, it really isn't that hard to cover, to have some summary of class and 4 videos. You're supposed to watch those videos anyway. By the way, if I didn't assign 4 videos, obviously I can't expect you to have 4 videos, right? So there are a couple of classes where I don't have very many videos. So I couldn't keep this criteria if I wanted to, because usually you have at least 4 videos. But I think there might be 1 or 2 classes where the videos are long and you don't. So I will know that. And so forth. Okay, so, and then finally on the bottom part, the self-reflection is, again, you not only are summarizing, but you're reflecting a little bit. So your 2 sentences, if you wrote 2 sentences on each of 2 sentences on class and 2 sentences on each of 4 videos, you would probably, wouldn't be necessarily, you could do that and actually stay probably under 200, stay around 200 words. If you do that and calculate that, think about that very seriously. I'm going to summarize and then reflect, 2 sentences each. You could probably do that in 200 words. Now you may want to express more than that, and so you may go up. And I mentioned the odds of you getting an A are greater if you get up closer to 300 words per class, because that's what you're competing with. And I'm going back to the idea that you're really competing against the other students. So I try to, if a final journal has more than 4,500 words, I can't totally ignore that some people have 9,000 words. But I also try not to allow that to affect me at all proportionately. But did the person who wrote 9,000 words really do that much better in the summary, or did they just kind of wander around and didn't make a lot of sense and just blah, 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 blah. Okay? I'm not going to be, I don't get impressed by a bunch of words that have no meaning and no real significance. So if you get up to that, if you do 300 a week, the difference between the 300 a week and 600 a week or per class is not going to change your grade that much, probably, if you do a good job. But again, the gal that wrote 18,000 words also was a good writer. She obviously got an A. She loved writing, and she said a lot. So obviously she got an A. But that's unusual, and that doesn't mean you can't get an A with 4,500. It doesn't even mean you can't get an A with 3,000 words in the final journal. But it's just harder. It's harder to give as good a summary in 3,000 words as you can in 4,500. And if you do a good job, again, I've had some that have been up around 10,000 that have just been blah, blah, blah. And those have not been, especially if I have some reason to think that it's been plagiarized, obviously then it goes way down. But even not plagiarized, if it's just a bunch of wordiness, it doesn't mean much, it's just, like I say, just blah, 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 that's not necessarily, even 9,000 words, not necessarily going to get you an A. So there might be a correlation. The more words you have, there might be a correlation with higher grades. But the correlation is not a perfect correlation. Just because you have a lot of words does not guarantee you an A by any means. Okay, so this is a weekly, and the last, when we get to the final version, then it's just kind of proportional, maybe a little bit different. But then if you have even up to 40 mistakes, but now you have a lot of words there, you can still get the full credit, whereas you have to have like 131 or so to get no credit. So hopefully by then you've eliminated a lot of your spelling mistakes, your grammar mistakes that you've made, and so that you can get as many of those points as possible. And then on the total number of words down here, again, A minus starts at 3,000 words, and to get the 100% of that part, 20% out of 20% in that section, you would have to go over 5,000 words. But those are just, small differences. And if you do well in everything else, you still get a good grade. Okay, any questions on that? I'm going to probably go back and turn it in and I gave some tentative due dates, and now thinking about all of this, I may change the due dates a little bit even today. Okay, so let me go back to the slideshow. And in fact, at the bottom of this very slide is where I also put, oh, no, I didn't. the one I was going to use, and it's on my other computer because it's trying to upload video while we're here talking. Yeah, that's still wrong. I'm using the old one. Anyway, the key again for this class is Success 2020. That's also the key for Turnitin.com. And I guess go to the coursework. Go to this coursework document at the top of Moodle to get the other information. Again, it is up in here, Turnitin.com, course number. You probably don't need the course number. Well, yeah, I think you do actually have to type it in. You do have to type in the course number. It is for Success Strategies 2020 is the name of the course. I put on Turnitin. There's some other stuff there. Ignore that. And again, the password or the key is Success 2020, also for Turnitin.com. If anybody has any trouble, please email me, and I'll try to figure out what your problem is. Okay, yesterday or in the last class, being days and weeks mixed up, in our last class, I had you, we talked a little bit about success and happiness. We also, I had you watch a video that you should have watched already. Down at the bottom, I changed it around in the final version, but there it is. So it's one by Emily Smith. I'm not sure how to pronounce her middle name, so I'm not going to try. Wrote about happiness. I guess as an example, let me suggest, she mentioned there's four pillars to happiness. I would suggest you know those 4 pillars when you take your quiz, because that would be an obvious thing for me to ask a question about, because that's the essence of this video, is what makes people happy. What are the corollaries to happiness? So I would suggest you should watch, if you haven't watched this video, you should, and you should figure out what are the corollaries to happiness. They are not, again, they're not reflective of the Hollywood happiness. And anybody remember, anybody want to recall or share with the class what any of those corollaries are? Anybody remember? You help each other out here. If not, then watch the video yourself and write down those 4 corollaries. Again, if you go into a video and it has something that obvious, that should be in your notes, right? And so when you get to the quiz, you have those ready to go. Because that's the whole, this is a fairly, well, not a real long video, 12 minutes, but that's the key to this whole video, is she's talking about 4 key, she talks about some other stuff. She talks about that, that might come up in a quiz, but certainly you should write down those 4 corollaries of success, of happiness rather. And what she says actually, well, she kind of puts it in a strange way. And I say, I wouldn't say express it the way she expressed it. Let me put it that way. She says something like, the pursuit of happiness sometimes leads to unhappiness. But it's kind of what I was talking about. If your happiness is based on fame and fortune, then if that's what you think will make you happy, then you're probably going the wrong direction. That is not those are not corollaries to happiness. And so that's, to me, what she's really saying is this conflict between success and happiness. What is success? What is happiness? And the two people, the two are not always compatible. Later on, I'll assign you to watch a video by another extremely smart person, Clayton Christensen. Anybody know who Clayton Christensen is, by chance? If you don't, you should. You should watch some of his videos on YouTube. If nothing else, you could read his books too, if you want to take the time to do that. Clayton Christensen was voted by the UK universities every 2 years, the top UK universities vote on the smartest business mind in the world. And Clayton Christensen won it twice. So he basically was the official smartest person in the room for 4 years. And he probably could have won it more, but they probably didn't want to give it to him more. It's kind of like, even if you have a Michael Jordan in basketball, they don't make him the most valuable player every year. Because it gets kind of boring, so they want to give it to somebody else. So even if you have a superstar in a sport, they don't give that person the most valuable player award every year. So same thing with this. They gave it to him 2 times in a row, and then they give it to other people. But Clayton Christensen is a Harvard professor who is the initiator of the concept of disruptive innovation. And you may have noticed that the word disrupt is being used in a lot of literature nowadays as a way of overturning or changing an industry, changing a field of thought. It's kind of the idea. The other name I was forgetting the other day of the about scientific revolutions, Thomas Kuhn, K-U-H-N is his name. K-U-H-N, kind of a strange name. I don't know that I ever met anybody named Kuhn, but Thomas Kuhn is the one that wrote about scientific revolutions. And in essence, that kind of dovetails with what Clayton Christensen researches, and that is what causes a revolution in the economy. And he has some very, if you're interested in business at all, you should get to know Clayton Christensen. Even if you are a geek, you're into computer science or whatever, even maybe all the more reason. In fact, I did a lecture over the internet to an IT class in India recently. And one of the things I explained to them is that the person who invents something is not necessarily the person who makes money. It's the person who figures out how to use a new technology or new ideas in a way to make money. So their innovation is how to make money. Whereas if you invent something wonderful as a geek, you may not make much money at all. The two don't go together. So when you talk about the big breakthroughs in this digital age, people like Facebook, there was a Facebook before there was Facebook. MySpace, I was in the MySpace social media before Facebook came along, and Facebook killed MySpace. There wasn't that much different. Exactly why Facebook won the battle against MySpace, I don't know why, but it did. They weren't that much different. And so it's how do you introduce new ideas, new technologies, new ideas into the marketplace is more important and more valuable economically than the actual invention itself, the actual technology itself. One of the examples I like to use for that is the bread cutter. Simple technology, but it wasn't invented until it was invented around 1910. The bread slicer was invented around 1910. Nobody bought it in 1910. And in fact, it wasn't really used very much until somebody else bought the rights to using it or bought it. I'm not sure. As I understand, the inventor did get a piece of the action, but basically another company named Wonder in the 1930s, 20 years after it was invented, more than 20 years, they figured out how to market it. And they made a really bright wrapper to it. They put some vitamins into the dough so they could say this is going to make you stronger and all this sort of stuff. They have vitamins in the bread now, and they sliced it. And it's kind of the combination of the wrapper, the vitamins, the slicing, and in 2 years, in the middle of the Great Depression, one of the worst, the worst depression in recorded history, more than half of the Americans went from unsliced bread to sliced bread, more than half in 2 years, because Wonder Bread figured out how to market it. I used to work in Kazakhstan. I mentioned that before. Guess what? nobody's marketed sliced bread to Kazakhstan. About less than 1% of all bread purchased in Kazakhstan is sliced. Nobody, the innovation hasn't gotten there yet. Now, 100 years later, they're still not buying sliced bread. So it's not the invention that is making the money, it's how to apply the invention, so to speak, how to apply the innovation. So the things that Clayton Christensen looks at are things like how is it that Toyota went into America and disrupted the auto industry and came in with a subcompact car that was really a piece of junk, and it eventually overcame Ford and General Motors. How Sony came into the American market and overcame the previous world leader named RCA. He goes through example. Nowadays, you can see more recent examples like Airbnb has disrupted the hotel industry. Grab and Uber have disrupted the taxi driving industry. So it's not necessarily, and those are good examples of, it's not exactly the technology, but it's how people figure out how to use technology to make things cheaper and better for more people, and they get rich off of it. So anyway, what I was getting to, however, is that Clayton Christensen also said he got his MBA and his PhD, I believe, from Harvard. I think he got all of his degrees from Harvard, I think. No, I think he got a bachelor's from the same one I did, Brigham Young University, I think. Anyway, but then he got his master's at least. And so he got his master's degree. And as of that point, they started having reunions, and all the people who had a master's degree in business, an MBA, would have a reunion every couple of years. And he said at first, everybody was happy. They were all out getting paid a lot of money because they're Harvard grads. And everybody was successful and happy and so forth. And then after a few years, people didn't show up as much. And if they did show up, they didn't seem quite as excited about life. And he started finding out that a lot of these people that had gone out of Harvard with their MBA and started making a lot of money also got divorced. And they lost their families in the process. And he said it's actually the same principle that he found that destroys companies is the same thing that destroys families. And what that is in essence, going for short-term profit. In the case of companies, those companies that try to make the higher profit margins are frequently going to what's called efficiency innovation. Efficiency is frequently might take you into robotics and stuff like that. In other words, you're going to lay off people. You're going to figure out how to do things more efficiently, and you're going to cut costs, and you're going to make more profit that way. But that's not the bad part. The bad part is they're not putting money into disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation is innovation that can change the entire industry, but it's riskier. It's also more profitable if you hit. If you hit it, you make a lot of money. If you don't hit it, you lose a bunch of money. And it takes 5 to 10 years to know whether you won or lost. Whereas efficiency is almost a guaranteed win. And you can figure it out after 1 year. Yeah, we made some money off of this efficiency. There's very little risk. And so over the 8 years of, for example, the Obama administration in America, from the Great Depression on through 2016, when President Trump was elected, there's very little recovery, very slow recovery from the recession, the slowest recovery ever. And what Dr. Christensen and another a venture capitalist from Silicon Valley, there's a video I'll have you watch when we get there later in our semester. They realized that basically nobody was investing in disruptive innovation. They were all scared of the market, they're scared of the economy, and they're all doing efficiency innovations, which actually laying people off, so we had more unemployment, not less. They were doing things that was very safe, and nobody was putting money into disruptive innovation. And so they pointed out at that time that there was that the companies, the big corporations, were paying a lot of royalties out because they weren't keeping the money. They were just they didn't want to risk the money. So they paid the money out to their stockholders. They saved none of it for disruptive innovation. And there was about $5 trillion invested in negative yield bonds. In other words, these were bonds, they were safe bonds, like government bonds and stuff, that guaranteed they'd lose money. But they're so scared of the economy, $5 trillion, 5 or 6 trillion, I can't remember the exact number, had been invested in negative yield bonds just to be safe. So they were paying for somebody to keep their money. So again, that money was not going to disruptive innovation. It was going into just the opposite, negative yield bonds, just to keep it safe. And so one of the main reasons why suddenly the American economy and other economies followed it when President Trump was elected is that sense of this positive attitude he brought into it. I'm going to do away with the regulations. I'm going to cut taxes. I'm going to, make this a business friendly environment. And suddenly that money started coming out of those negative yield bonds into disruptive innovation and so forth. Employment started growing because disruptive innovation requires new employment. Efficiency innovation requires less employees. And so everything changed basically the day that President Trump was elected, and mostly attitudinal. But then he did lower taxes in America, and he did cut regulations, a lot of regulations in America to make it a more business-friendly environment. Started working in trade deals and stuff. But it was mostly, that I think, that's in my opinion, mostly thinking back on this discussion between the venture capitalist and Clayton Christensen, was that $5 trillion came out of those bonds and went into innovation and started a rapid reemployment of people. Anyway, so that was a problem of making the least risky investment. And so anyway, in the family, what he found was kind of similar, is that people are looking for the best rewards they can find. And what the Harvard MBAs were doing was they found immediate gratification from their work and very little gratification from their family. So they were so career focused that they were ignoring their family. If they did something with their family, it's kind of, I guess I'll sacrifice my time for my kids or whatever. It was kind of begrudgingly investing their time into their kids. Kids are a long-term investment. They're the disruptive innovation, so to speak. They're the long-term investment that will lead to greater happiness in the long run. The family will lead to greater happiness. That's one of the things that Emily said, was that having the people around you that love you, that give you this positive support, is the long-term investment, so to speak, in Clayton Christensen's terms. That's your disruptive innovation. Whereas they were going for short-term profits, the short-term highs, and the short-term highs for the Harvard MBAs was all work-oriented. And so they were giving their best, they were investing into the short-term gratification and ignoring the long-term gratification, so to speak. And in the process, they were going through divorces. Their kids were being raised by some other man and his ex-wife. And so some of the same principles that we've been talking about, what leads to success, what leads to happiness. If success is getting money, it may be actually contrary to happiness. It may be taking the short-term profits, so to speak, in your life and making and enjoying your professional life and ignoring your family, and that leads to long-term unhappiness in doing that. So that's, I'm correlating a couple of ideas here, but that's one of the four columns of happiness, is having, and also this other that I assigned another guy. maybe not. There was another video that I used to assign, and maybe I assigned later, I don't know, who came to the same conclusion, that basically those people that have a good family life are happy, and those that don't, they get isolated and they don't tend to be as happy. So I know there's been some recent research that claims just the contrary, but I think that's mostly of people, kind of the millennials are in this idea of just living your life, and you don't have family, you kind of vagabonds around the world, travel a lot and all this sort of stuff, and they're claiming they're happier that way. And we'll see how it turns out when they're 80 years old, and they don't have a family and they're by themselves, and then re-interview them, resurvey them then. We watched Jack Ma's video in class, and we watched Denzel Washington's, Peter Diamandis, that video. I assigned that to you because of his positive attitude. He's done more recent videos, by the way. That was back around 2008 or 2010, so in that time frame, maybe in 2007. I forget exactly when he did that one. But he's talking about how, for example, we're redefining what poverty is. And it's kind of stupid to compare poverty in America to poverty in India, for example. There's no correlation. There's nothing alike. A poor person in America with the social programs we have still has a color TV set, still has his mobile phone, still has indoor toilets, still has air conditioning, still has a nice place to live, at least an apartment. The people that don't have that, the homeless people, are people that are a little bit crazy. They're not taking advantage of social programs that the government is offering. And so if they're living out in the streets, it's by choice, not because they have to, because there are programs that would allow them to avoid that. Anyway, so a poor person in America, one thing he pointed out, if you watch that video, was that a poor person in America has things that a king less than 100 years earlier than that would have given half of his fortune for, half of his kingdom for, such as color TV, such as connection to the internet, the mobile phone. Just 100 years before that, the king might not have had indoor plumbing even. Still didn't have electricity still 100 years before. While you're talking about, when you're talking about 1870, something like that. They lacked a lot of those things that a poor person now takes for granted if they're in some place like America. So how do they get fresh fruit. If you're a poor person in America, you can get food stamps. So you can go to the grocery store and get fresh fruit. You can get, a lot of stuff from the government program, through the government program, that a king couldn't have 100 years before that. So the definition of poverty, especially in some place like America, is totally distorted in a way. And that's why millions of people are trying to go to America. Because, if you're living, as I mentioned before, you're living in Mexico and you're making $2 a day in Mexico, and you risk your life, literally, many of them risk their lives to get to America illegally, because they can make, closer to $15 an hour working in the fields. So $2 a day, $15 an hour working in the fields. Yes, things are more expensive in America than in Mexico, but $15 can go a long way. $15 an hour. So you work 8 hours or something, and so you made $120 during the day. You made $2 a day back in Mexico. Well, you can afford a little bit higher cost of living, and part of that higher cost of living is a better lifestyle. You're living in a shack that you built yourself that doesn't have electricity in Mexico, and you go to America and you rent an apartment and you have electricity, you have a dishwasher, you have indoor plumbing, you have all sorts of stuff. You now make enough money, you can buy a nice pickup, stuff like that. So, that's why millions of people are trying to cross that border illegally, and they're willing to risk their lives for it. And so again, poverty in America and poverty in Mexico. are totally different, even now. So more importantly, Diamandis is talking about how in a world of abundance, things are essential commodities are going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. His example, one of the examples he gave was aluminum. Aluminum in the old days was very, very expensive, to the point that when the King of France had as a guest the King of Siam, he provided eating utensils made out of aluminum, while he ate off of just gold. So aluminum was actually worth more than gold at that time. Well, now aluminum is, pennies on the ounce, so it's nothing, because it's become easier to create aluminum, and so it's much less valuable now than gold. But that time, just again, in the mid 1800s or something, aluminum is more valuable than gold. What happened is the abundance. The abundance of aluminum killed its value as far as what you had to pay for it. And so he's talking about things like electricity. As we go solar, electricity is going to be almost free. Once you have free electricity, then suddenly you can start desalinizing the ocean to have more irrigation. So suddenly food will be a lot cheaper and more abundant throughout the world. Anyway, just going through things like that. It's just that with the internet, gradually, probably educate. I mean, already in a sense, education is free if you just go to the internet. Plenty of education on the internet. You won't get a diploma for it, maybe, if you take the free version. Although there's some really low cost ones that do have diplomas with them, and that'll probably be greater and greater as we go into the future, to where an education may be essentially free. So he's, basically there's a lot of extremely valuable things. Healthcare. He's talking about how healthcare you'll be able to get some of the best healthcare consultation in the world off of your mobile phone. If you're, belong to some tribe in the deepest jungles of Africa, you have your mobile phone. You can figure out what's going on and get something tested over the internet and so forth. So there's his view of the world is that it's going to get better and better and better, because as things become abundant, like cheaper solar electricity, then lots of other things follow that line, and we have an extremely bright future as long as we don't screw it up ourselves through wars or things like that. Hopefully we'll figure out how to live in peace at the same time that we live in prosperity. And there are serious questions as to what happens when robotics take over, most of the manual labor. Then what do people do? I don't think it's him, as somebody else was saying, that right now in America there are 10 million artificial intelligence jobs, programming sort of jobs, and developing AI that are unfilled because there are just not people in America to fill those jobs. And so, as I mentioned the other day, lifelong learning and learning new skills, learning to adapt to new economic situations are going to be vital. Some jobs are going to disappear, and some jobs are going to be new and different. Just exactly how we work that out in the economy, related to how you make money, how the social aspects to it. Don't know. We have to work that out, and it's going to be it could be kind of scary, in that a lot of this, I haven't assigned it to this class before. But another class I assigned we watched, and then I think I assigned them to watch the rest of it. There was over an hour-long video about what's happening right now in the next 10 years. For example, the quantum computer. Google has created the first quantum computer that is like 10,000 times faster than any other computer on Earth right now. What happens with quantum computing? Well, suddenly a lot of other problems are solved, because you can give it problems and it will figure it out. AI goes along with that. So as you have quantum computing and artificial intelligence, and then you put that into robotics. All those things start meshing. 5G is important because now you can put more that 5G is massively greater than 4G. And so suddenly the internet connections become much, much greater. You can do much, much more than you can with 4G as 5G spreads through the world. All these things are going to happen during the next 10 years and are going to totally transform our society in the next 10 years. Computers will, at that point, be probably voice controlled totally. Now you have a little bit of voice control, but as AI increases and storage increases and quantum computing increases, it will be now, Star Trek world where you're talking to your computer fairly naturally in natural voice, and it will understand you and do what you need it to do. And that's all going to happen in the next 10 years. It's amazing and a little scary in that you can count in the next 10 years changing your life, changing all of society because of those areas, 5G, AI, robotics. All those things are going to have massive impact on the world, and how we respond to that in that short period of time. The fact that it's going to happen all at once is kind of the scary part. How do you adapt when it all hits at once? Kind of a perfect storm with negative and positive aspect to it. The transition our society ought to make as all those things hit at once will be significant. Okay, well, just wanted to review some of that stuff that we looked at last week, or last class. You have a bunch of short videos this time, and actually the other one that is about family is this Robert Waldinger down to the bottom. So that's one of the longer ones. Oh, and I do have Dr. Christensen. I just told you part of what he said. He'll explain it more. So those are the two longer ones. The other ones are all kind of short. Let's watch one of these. I'm not bringing my normal computer here, so I realize I may not have access to what I need. Well, I can download it. Doesn't respond the same in a download as it does online. The main thing I wanted to do today was to go over all the, the coursework and stuff so you understood that. You may not